What would you consider to be good examples of brands and athletes that you are either a part of or that you've seen?
What Head and Shoulders has done with Troy and now what they're doing with Mahomes. But it's very different when you have people that played the game, right? And they're talking about their peers and their friends, and they're kind of giving a lot of the backstories, right? The competitiveness, the things that the camera misses.
Welcome to the Think Tank, everybody. I'm your host, Trey Holder, and today our guest is Keenan Beasley, a marketing guru who's done all kinds of things in his life with sports and has an awesome platform that we'll get into later. But, Keenan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you jumping on with short notice, too. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple months and excited to spend time together in the future at all these events out on the circuit. Doing all kinds of stuff out there. But tell the audience a little bit about your background. You're a P&G and all kinds of other stuff. I'm sure everybody would like to learn a little bit about you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a West Point football player. So I always say that just because there's a mix of aggression in service. But after that, I was at Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, L'Oreal. So I've done everything from, launching Tide Pods to Gillette and Mach 3 around the world, to Frank's Red Hot Sauce and French's Mustard, to Garnier Hair Care. Spent the bulk of my career in the big CPG companies.
Awesome. Well, yeah, by the way, it was funny when we were out in Vegas, we had that lunch with Cam and took the picture after. And I mean, you're a pretty big dude, played linebacker, West Point and everything. And he's just a giant, man. I mean, I was sitting there thinking, man, I wouldn't want to stop that guy even if I was your size coming through the hole, right?
I think that's what is humbling for people when they get around some pro athletes. They see there's a pretty big difference between even a D1 athlete and a top tier pro. Just sheer physicality, it's unbelievable, man. Remarkable.
I know. I mean, I've worked out. I feel like I'm a pretty fit guy, and I feel like a midget. Anyway, man, it's all good stuff. So I know you've worked with athletes in the past at brands and stuff like that. Would love to get your perspective on, how athletes can work with brands. I mean, I know when we sat down and we were having the conversation with Cam and everything, I mean, you really have some deep knowledge and at least perspective and thoughts on what that looks like. I'd love for you to share some of your ideas and thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it's different by sport, right? Because certain sports, people have had time to develop their own personal brand. So what I tell most of the athletes is, what is your personal brand first before you start trying to engage with brands? Because what you're really looking for are these authentic connections. So it's important for the athlete to know who they are, what they're interested in, and what their brand stands for. Then you can find the right brands, right, that align well. Because, with athletes, they're so used to the transaction, right, of money, and they see what's going on by working with brands. But what they really need to be able to do is say no. What brand should you say no to? Who doesn't align well? Because a bad interaction is so harmful to their brand where other people don't want to work with them. So I think for me, it's really about making sure these guys know like what their personal brand is so they can have an authentic connection with the right brand.
That makes sense. I mean, I think authenticity, right, is the biggest piece. You said it there at the end. And I did a post on LinkedIn the other day and somebody jumped in and said, hey, how can athletes work with brands? And I said something kind of similar first, right? Like, does it align with your brand? Does it feel authentic? And then ultimately, does it come out in your voice? Because if it doesn't come out in your voice, it's not going to index well with consumers, right?
Yeah. You're not a trained actor, right? So if you're acting,
that's true. We see that too in that NIL space, right? Where, authenticity is really important for those college athletes. They're not trained creators, right? They got to learn how.
That's what brands are buying, right? They're buying that organic, authentic community. So what a brand is trying to do is they're hoping that they can leverage your community that you've already built because people enjoy you as an athlete, right? And what you stand for. So that's what the brand's trying to engage with. Right, you as an athlete, you're also trying to engage with their audience, right? Because it can grow your fan base as well, right? It can build more. So you're looking for that connection, that mesh, right? That really works. But yeah, if I see the guys and gals, man, when they're trying to act, I'm like, stop it. Stop it. That's a different profession, man. That's
well,
not the way.
well, in that vein, I mean, what would you consider to be good examples of brands and athletes that you are either a part of or that you've seen, in the past, where you felt like that true authentic voice is there? It feels authentic to the athlete and the brand.
The two that come to mind, like that are very brand athlete, like legacy, Head and Shoulders, right? What Head and Shoulders has done with Troy and now what they're doing with Mahomes, it's just so funny because these guys are known for their hair, right? And the linking, it allows them to have a little bit of personality. So I love what Head and Shoulders does with their athletes and how they kind of kept Troy around, right? For years, even though in retirement, right? He's still a part of the brand. It fits so well. So I love that one. And I think the second, man, for me is Campbell's Chunky Soup. Right? I love the fact that they take the athletes with their moms, right? In that story, because that's just something that, one, the guys want to give credit to their moms, right? That's a big part of an athlete's story because their family was why they were able to get to where they are, right? That level of support from a little kid. So I think having that connection is super cool and real. I think Procter & Gamble has kind of piggybacked on that with the Thanks Mom campaign, with the Olympics, etc. But those family stories I really like, man, where it's not just the athlete, but it's the athlete's household.
Totally agree. In fact, I was, I don't know if you know Jason John over at 1-800-Flowers, was having that conversation the other day. Like, why aren't you working with, especially these college athletes, right? I mean, there's some huge campaigns I think they should be working on for Mother's Day and all of that stuff. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see if he puts it into action, but I think it'd be a really, really good opportunity for them. And by the way, I love Little Troy and the Head and Shoulders commercial. It reminds me, I remember the old days, the Little Penny. Remember Little Penny?
The Penny Hardaway, man, that was classic, man. That was classic. And you know what's so great about this story? I actually just had a conversation with some of the folks that did that. It was because Penny was super shy, right? He wasn't an extrovert. So they actually had to create this persona where he was pretty silent, right? In the whole campaign. So again, like that's great marketing, man. That credit to the creative team and the agency for that one.
That's super interesting. That's behind the scenes stuff right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't know that necessity is the mother of invention, right? You're like, we got to use this guy. We got to figure something else out. And they came up with some creative genius there that we're talking about, 20 years later?
Absolutely. So like they didn't feel the need to force him to talk, right? He's a great athlete. His profession was speaking for itself, right? His game was speaking. So now it's like, let's leverage that, but let's create this persona so that we can kind of get through this. It was genius. That's genius stuff there. Great example.
So any great stories you want to share working with athletes that you want to share for the audience?
I mean, I guess I have two, right? The first I'll share was me as talent because I never played that role, right, Trey? I'm like you, man. We're behind the scenes. We're marketers. We're sales, right? We're operators. But I got a chance to host a podcast with Brandon Marshall called I Am Athlete on his platform, and we had guys like Nick Young, right? Swaggy P. We had Brandon Jennings. We had Duke, right? Another, NFL guy. And then Michael Bennett, who's become one of my best friends. It was just cool to be on that platform and feel the locker room again, right? And I think that's what the audience loved, right? And I like these kind of news stories and the new voice of sports media now with that's coming from the athlete, so that we feel like we're a part of it. Right, it's one thing to have commentators, right, and people that are quote unquote experts at analyzing the game, but it's very different when you have people that played the game, right, and they're talking about their peers and their friends, and they're kind of giving a lot of the backstories, right, the competitiveness, the things that the camera misses. I love seeing that happen right now in sports, so that was definitely one of my favorite times. We did about 4 episodes, so that was super cool. But I would say on a brand standpoint, one was, Super Bowl when we launched Tide for Breeze Sport, and we used the Venus Williams and Serena Williams, and we did that out in Miami, their town where they were living. The Super Bowl was in Miami, and we just had this like mile long on Ocean Ave, right? This Tide mile of clean, and we just had all these games and booths set up. And next thing you know, you got Terrell Owens and Jamie Foxx playing one-on-one basketball, and it was just such a cool, organic activation with pro athletes that were paid and then some that were unpaid that just wanted to pull up with their friends and engage with it. And it was just amazing content, a great way to launch a really innovative product.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's all to the point of your first example as well. You know, I mean, I think that's what is very interesting to fans. Like, where do they go after the game? You know, what's that? Yeah. How competitive are those pool games and those ping pong matches and everything else, right? I mean, but they're just people, right? You know, just like us. I mean, I found we had our Brand Innovators Super Bowl, you know, event, and one of the things I thought was really interesting is, you know, Tim Ellis, the CMO of the NFL, was up there, and they were talking. They had the campaign that they launched during Super Bowl that was around bullying, you know, and these athletes, these big time NFL athletes were participating. And he said something I never even really thought of. It's very true. It's like, it sounds weird, but these NFL guys, they're getting bullied every day, right? By fans. And you can imagine what that does to your psyche. Yes, you make a lot of money. Same with any celebrity, right? And I think as fans, we look at it and say, you know, they make $10 million a year, they can handle it. But I mean, that's got to be rough on the psyche because they're just humans too. You know? 100%. Anyway, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. And he said, you know, they were excited to do this because they feel like they get bullied and they want to support and get rid of that pastime, I guess, of bullying out there in the world that needs to go away. So seeing athletes and celebrities as real people isn't real easy for us to do, but they are.
You know, and it's interesting too, and that's why I say it changes by sport, right? When you play basketball, you're used to your face being out there, right? On the court, right? It's 10 of you on the court at a time. We get to interact with them, and so they're used to that from children, right? Through the AAU circuit all the way up through college, right? In the pros. Football, though, you got a helmet on, right? So a lot of the guys don't really get recognized until they become superstars in the NFL and they're taking that helmet off. And people now, so it's very new, and we forget that, right? They don't have years and years of media training, right, and all of that. So yeah, you know, some of those comments and things that it can sting. that can sting, you know. And sports is a game of confidence, right? So like, you don't want to rattle your confidence, but man, sometimes you read those comments. This guy's trash. It depends on how you can wire yourself, right, to take that. But yeah,
sure. It's tough. That's funny. The helmet example. I mean, you know, I'm a big Longhorn. I mean, I'm representing all the time here, even with what I drink, right? But I remember Ricky, right? I mean, he's one of my favorite players ever. Yeah. And you remember he wouldn't take his helmet off for interviews because, you know, later out, and you know, he shared that he was suffering from social anxiety, but nobody saw it that way, right? It was like, this guy's too good for us. He won't take his helmet off, you know? Yeah. Good example, you know, I think of that, right? You're kind of behind the armor. When you got that on, all of a sudden you got to take it off, and you're trained to be a gladiator in that sport too, right? So that it's got to be kind of difficult, you know, to do that. So I know we talked a little bit earlier, you know, kind of about authenticity with athletes, but you know, any advice that you give to brands and/or athletes on how to work together outside of the authenticity piece, or is that really the most compelling aspect of them working together?
I think that's the most compelling. I think the other one though is, you know, first and foremost, continue to focus on your craft, right? Like, continue to focus on being the best athlete possible, right? I think sometimes that gets a little lost, right? When we try to gamify things, right? And we want to be more celebrity than athlete. So I think the athletes, please continue to focus on being the best athlete and a champion and a winner, right? Like that is number one. Second is practice on building your brand. Right. So sometimes it's very difficult, right? It's not a natural thing to pull your phone out and talk to it. that is awkward. Right. And it's something that you have to practice. And so I think for a lot of them, like, get out there and try it yourself before you go and hire the big teams, right, to go ahead and do it. Actually find a way to fall in love with the process of it the same way you did with sports. And I think you can tell the athletes that do that actually enjoy it. Right, there's a big difference between when you watch Odell Beckham interact, right, socially as a football player, and let's say Russell Wilson, very different. You can tell who practices, who enjoys it, right? Who does it, who's outside with it. So I think practice, get your reps in, just like you do in sports. And then when you get with that brand, it's easy for you, right? You already have the habit, you already have the muscle memory. So I think that's something, right? Is like build your own voice through social, through some of these platforms, build your own brand. And that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And, get the reps, right? It's the old 10,000 hours thing. If you're going to be committed to it,
it's awkward.
It's not easy for anybody to do what we're doing right now, to get in and talk in front of people and just to keep practicing and practicing and practicing. It's interesting though that you talked about making sure that, you're perfecting your primary craft, right? Because I think about, because we clearly, brand innovators have gotten involved with the college sports piece. I'm, repping the shirt today, right? And
yes.
and I'm a big, I said I'm a big fan of college sports. I'm excited to be involved in it. And you got to think about these athletes that are in college. I mean, they're still not professionals at what they do, right? They still have not reached the zenith. And now they're being offered all of these opportunities to have houses and drive fancy cars and represent all these brands. And how do you do that and juggle that and still perfect your craft? And then quite candidly, as a coach, how do you make sure there isn't a lot of dissension in the locker room, because so-and-so's over there shooting a video and everybody else is in the middle of the speech, right, about what's going on. So I think it's a tough juggle that they're going to have to learn how to do.
I mean, it's new, right? We saw what Nick Saban said, right? You got one of the greatest college coaches ever, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. It is not, it's not the game and the structure you signed up for. And look, like all things, it changes, right? So we'll adjust, and the professional coaches, they'll figure it out. The players, they'll figure it out. But again, I think for us as fans, right, for guys like you and I, we just want to see great sports, right? Like we still want to see great athletes and people accomplishing things, physically, right, and mentally that we dream of, right? We still look up to the professional athletes. They still represent what real work ethic at the most high and extreme level is, right? So it's like, we still love that. So don't lose that. Please don't lose that. So whatever we do is we're working on this branding thing, right? And then everybody's trying to get their money. I love it. Just still be a great athlete.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one more note on that. I mean, I saw yesterday, it came out yesterday, the day before, that Arch Manning is opting out of EA Sports, whatever that means. And I'm not even 100% sure I know what it means, but, they clearly come from a family that understands the long term versus the short term, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, he's going to transfer out of Texas. I'm like, he's not going to transfer out of Texas. Eli didn't start really, until he was a redshirt sophomore, and he's basically on that same path. And, it's about the long game. And so I think that's one of the things these athletes have to recognize is, that's a $5,000 deal here, but, if you perfect the craft and make it to the big leagues, the level of compensation is much, much greater, including the name, image, and likeness opportunities. So you got to always think about, the long term in any business, by the way, right? Short-term goals, but are your short-term goals going to help you realize your long-term goals? I think that's the balance we all have to have, in life.
Yeah, I mean, look, like with all things, right? The opportunities come before the infrastructure, right? So right now, the opportunities are there. Everyone's excited. We love it. The infrastructure is catching up, right? That's why the work that you're doing makes sense, right? Like we're going to start to get the routine. We're going to start to get the process, right, with NIL and kind of what this new world of both media and sports, what it all looks like, right? This new entertainment. So it'll catch up. So I'm like, I tell everyone that's kind of freaking out, I'm like, just relax. It's early, right? We just got into the NIL era. Like, take your time. It'll smooth itself out.
Yeah, I'm not in love with the ability to transfer out every year. I think they need to do something about that. But look, honestly, it's creating parity. I mean, I think this year's college football season is going to be so exciting with, these big teams going into other conferences with a 12-team playoff. There's a little bit more parity there. Because if you think about it, I mean, at the beginning of every year, if you aren't Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, or Georgia, what are you even playing for?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and now there's going to be some real opportunity. So that's exciting. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you're up to. So, you know, I know you've been working on a platform or doing some other stuff. You want to share with the audience, you know, what you got going on would be great.
Yeah, you know, I think this is why this topic is so near and dear to me, right? My whole life is really centered around putting infrastructure around influence, right? And so who possesses the influence? It's athletes and entertainers. So that is who I tend to work with. And I look at how do we wrap what they are and their IP around and put that in products as well as media. So we have two things. So we have a venture studio that focuses on building consumer products and brands. That's called Maison Noir for a lot of your leading athletes and entertainers. And then we also have a new ad-free or ad-supported streaming service called Factory Media Group that is launching here in Q2. So that is just what we're bringing to life stories, right? It's like, what's the new media, right? How are we talking about sports? What's the new commentator, right? When you look at Gilbert Arenas talking about sports, it's very different than when you turn on ESPN. And I think that's what people want to see, right? These authentic stories. So we are now aggregating great storytelling from authentic creators right now.
I love it, man. Well, like we said earlier, I'm excited. I think that's cool to get their perspective. You know, I think about the Players Tribute. You know, I mean, they did that with the written words to get that started, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. And we're now accustomed to going straight to the source.
Right? That's what we want, right? We want the creative freedom, right? That's what social media has allowed us to do, right? There's no longer this producer in a script, right? That media is reading from. We're now getting stories and thoughts and views directly from the source. And now let's wrap that up into a medium that we enjoy and that we're comfortable with. So that's what it's all about right now.
That's awesome, man. I can't wait to continue to watch you on that journey. And I know you're going to have tremendous success, and really appreciate you showing up today. I guess I'll leave with one, you know, give me a bold prediction here. Pick a sport. Who's going to win? You know, give me NBA. Who's going to win the NFL next year? Who's going to win the SEC? I mean, give me something. What do you got?
I'm going Caleb is going to drop to 4 or 5 in the draft.
Wow.
I think he slided.
That's a bold prediction for sure.
I'll go with that one because I'm curious, man. I'm curious to see how the NFL is going to react to a young man with that level of confidence, right, and skill set. I'm wondering if they're going to penalize him a little bit, right? If teams want to work with him. So I'm curious. I'm curious.
Does that mean does that mean the Bears keep Fields?
I think so. I think.
By the way, did you see my dude Xavier Worthy for the Longhorns hit 4.21? Man, that was crazy.
Crazy. That was, and didn't even look like he was trying.
I know. He could have settled for that 4.25. He's like, no. You know he beat that. You know I mean, I wonder if he got sub 4.2 in practice. I mean, that was crazy.
Oh, 100%. He's ran a 4.1 something before. 100%. You could just tell because it was effortless. And you got to think about the pressure in the crowd, like just what's going on at the combine, the jitters, wheels, man. That was impressive.
He made himself some money, I think. I'm hoping he goes to the Chiefs. He's the perfect place for the Chiefs. Is a perfect spot for him. I saw Mahomes up on the Twitter too. It's put that number out there, so they're watching.
Oh, 100%. That's a game changer right there. You get him out in the open. Oh, you're not keeping up with that.
Yeah, amazing.
I'm all LA. You know I'm all LA. So Dodgers, Lakers, come on, man. That's what I am.
I'm with it. We'll see what the Lakers can do. At least they got the in-season tourney, man. They got that banner. So,
Jack,
all right, man. Well, hey, dude, totally appreciate you coming on. Excited to see you in a couple weeks
yes, sir.
Out in Vegas, and appreciate your time on the show, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely.